The old Victorian house on Maple Street stood quiet under the weight of a late autumn evening. Its tall windows glowed faintly, casting pools of golden light onto the frost-dusted lawn. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and cinnamon, a warmth that clung to the walls despite the chill creeping through the cracks. James Hartley, a man whose wealth was matched only by the solitude it brought, sat in his study, the soft ticking of a grandfather clock marking time. His fingers traced the rim of a coffee mug, long gone cold. At 42, James was a millionaire. A single father and a man who carried the weight of his choices like a stone in his chest. Asterisk, his daughter, Lily, slept upstairs in a room painted with stars. At 6 years old, she was the light of his world, her laughter a melody that could pierce even his darkest days. But those days had grown heavier since his wife, Emily, passed 3 years ago. The house, once filled with her voice, now echoed with absence. James managed his tech empire from this very study, his days a blur of meetings and contracts, but his nights belonged to Lily and to the guilt that he wasn't enough for her. Asterisk, the nanny, Clara Thompson, had been a godsend. At 28, she was gentle, patient, and carried a quiet strength that steadied the chaos of their lives. She'd started working for James 6 months ago, recommended by a friend who swore she was practically family. Clara read Lily bedtime stories with voices for every character, braided her hair with care, and knew exactly how to coax a smile when tears threatened. James trusted her implicitly, though he kept his distance, wary of blurring lines. He was her employer, nothing more. Asterisk tonight, though, something felt off. The house was too still. James set his mug down and glanced at the clock. 10:17 p.m. Lily should be asleep, and Clara usually left by 9, slipping out quietly after her duties were done. He stood, stretching his stiff shoulders, and decided to check on things. The hallway was dim, lit only by a single sconce that flickered like a candle. He climbed the stairs, each step creaking under his weight, and paused at Lily's door. Peeking in, he saw her curled under her quilt, her small chest rising and falling. Safe, sound. Asterisk, but where was Clara? Asterisk, he descended the stairs, his brow furrowing. The living room was empty, the kitchen dark. A faint unease settled in his chest. Had she left without saying goodbye? It wasn't like her. Then, as he passed the small den near the back of the house, a room cluttered with books and lilies. Toys, he stopped. The door was ajar, and a sliver of light spilled onto the hardwood floor. He pushed it open slowly, the hinges groaning. Asterisk, there, on the floor, was Clara. Asterisk, she lay on a thin blanket, her coat folded under her head as a makeshift pillow. Her dark hair fanned across the fabric, and her hands were tucked under her cheek as if she'd curled up to protect herself from the world. A worn duffel bag sat nearby, its zipper half open, revealing a few clothes and a dog-eared paperback. James froze, his breath catching. The sight was so unexpected, so raw, that it felt like intruding on something private. He stepped back, his heart thudding, and closed the door as softly as he could. Asterisk, back in his study, he sat heavily in his chair, staring at the wall. Why was Clara sleeping on the floor? She had a home, didn't she? He paid her well more than fair, he thought. His mind raced, piecing together fragments. Clara never spoke of her personal life, always deflecting with a smile or a question about Lily. He'd assumed she lived nearby, maybe in an apartment in town. But the duffel bag, the blanket, it told a different story. Shame crept over him. How had he not noticed? Asterisk, the next morning, James watched Clara closely. She arrived at 7, her usual time, her face bright despite the faint shadows under her eyes. She knelt beside Lily at the kitchen table, helping her color a picture of a pumpkin. "Look at that orange," Clara said, her voice warm. It's like the sunset we saw last week. Lily giggled, her crayon scribbling wildly. James stood in the doorway, a coffee mug in hand, searching for a way to bring it up. But the words felt heavy, clumsy. He didn't want to embarrass her. Asterisk instead. He waited. That evening, after Lily was tucked in, he found Clara in the kitchen, wiping down the counter. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that begged for truth. Asterisk, Clara, he said, his voice low. Can we talk? Asterisk, she turned, her hands pausing on the rag. Of course, Mr. Hartley. Is everything okay? Asterisk, he hesitated, then gestured to the small table. Please, sit. Asterisk, she did, her posture stiff, her eyes wary. James sat across from her, his hands clasped. Last night, he began, I saw you in the den. You were sleeping on the floor. Asterisk, her face paled, and she looked down, her fingers twisting the rag. I'm so sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to overstay. I fell asleep. It won't happen again. Asterisk, Clara, he said gently. Why were you there? Don't you have a place to go? Asterisk, she bit her lip, her eyes glistening. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I don't. Not right now. Asterisk, the words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. James leaned forward, his voice steady but soft. What happened? Asterisk, Clara took a shaky breath. My apartment? The rent went up. I couldn't afford it anymore. I've been staying with a friend, but her place is small, and her boyfriend doesn't like me there. I've been trying to find something, but it's hard. I didn't want to bother you with it. Asterisk, James felt a pang in his chest. He thought of the duffel bag, the blanket. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. I could have helped. Asterisk, her eyes met his, raw and unguarded. I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle things. You and Lily, you're my priority. I didn't want to seem weak. Asterisk, the vulnerability in her voice broke something in him. He saw her now, not just as the nanny who made Lily laugh, but as a woman carrying her own burdens, alone. He stood, pacing to the window, the moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. You're not weak, he said finally. You're the strongest person I know. What you do for Lily, for this house, it's more than I could ever ask. Asterisk, Clara wiped her eyes, a small smile flickering. Thank you, she whispered. Asterisk, he turned to face her. Stay here tonight, not on the floor. There's a guest room upstairs. It's yours for as long as you need it. Asterisk, her eyes widened. Mr. Hartley, I can't. Asterisk, James, he corrected, his tone firm but kind. And you can. You're family to Lily. You're important to us. Let me help you like you've helped us. Asterisk, Clara hesitated, then nodded, her shoulders relaxing. Okay, she said softly. Thank you, James. Asterisk, the next few days were different, quieter in a new way. Clara moved into the guest room, her duffel bag tucked neatly in the corner. Lily was thrilled, declaring it a sleepover. Every night, James found himself noticing Clara more, the way she hummed softly while cooking, the way her laughter filled the house. He caught himself smiling, a warmth spreading in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Asterisk, but the twist came gently, unexpectedly. One evening, as Clara read to Lily in the living room, James overheard their conversation. Lily's small voice asked, Clara, are you going to stay forever? Asterisk, Clara paused, her voice soft. I don't know, sweet girl, but I'll stay as long as you need me. Asterisk, James stood in the hallway, unseen, his heart tightening. He realized then that it wasn't just Lily who needed her. He did too. Not as a nanny, but as someone who'd brought light back into his home, into his life. The thought startled him, but it felt right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Asterisk over the next week, James took steps. He contacted a realtor friend, quietly arranging to cover the deposit on a small apartment for Clara in a safe neighborhood. He didn't tell her. He wanted it to be a surprise, a way to give her stability without taking her independence. But he also started inviting her to stay for dinner, not as an employee, but as a friend. They talked late into the night about Lily, about life, about the dreams they'd both tucked away. Clara shared stories of her childhood in a small town, her love for teaching, her hope to one day open a daycare. James found himself opening up too about Emily, about the loneliness that wealth couldn't fill. Asterisk one evening, as snow dusted the windows, James handed Clara an envelope. She opened it, her eyes scanning the lease agreement, the keys taped inside. "James," she whispered, tears welling. "Why?" Asterisk, "Because you deserve a home," he said simply. "And because I want you to know you're not alone." Asterisk she hugged him, a quick, fierce embrace that left them both a little breathless. Lily ran in, oblivious, demanding a story. They laughed, the tension easing, and sat together on the couch, Clara reading while James watched, his heart full. Asterisk the house on Maple Street felt alive again. Clara stayed on as Lily's nanny, but something had shifted. The lines between employer and friend blurred, softened by trust and quiet moments. James didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in years, he felt hope. The floor where Clara had slept was just a memory now, replaced by a warmth that promised new beginnings. Asterisk, and as the snow fell outside, the three of them sat together, a family not by blood, but by choice, bound by a kindness that had changed everything.